100% of its market value. It turns out the city government systematically inflated the property tax assessments of homes in Detroit beyond this legal limit. In fact, between 2009 and 2015, 55 to 85% of Detroit properties were unconstitutionally assessed each year. This led to illegally inflated taxes on those properties. Why? Because in 2008, home values in Detroit plummeted as a result of the Great Recession. But instead of reducing property tax assessments to match the lower value of homes, the government robotically copied the previous rates, making only minor adjustments. It was no surprise that residents weren't able to pay. And here's the kicker. Many families were not supposed to be paying property taxes in the first place because they qualify for the Michigan poverty tax exemption. But Detroit didn't publicize this and made the application process so difficult that it was nearly impossible to complete. So when we look at the decimation that unconstitutional property tax assessments have left behind, who is to blame? Working and poor people who are struggling to provide a home for their families? Or the government, who systematically and illegally inflated the assessed values of homes to increase their property tax revenue, then seized homes from families when they could not afford to pay? Join our fight to end unconstitutional tax foreclosures in Detroit.
Here's a quick explanation of assessments and overassessments in Detroit. First of all, let's start with the basics. Government wants to tax people fairly. If you have a more expensive house, you should pay more in taxes. The property tax is supposed to work like the sales tax. Everyone pays the same tax rate. The Michigan sales tax rate is 6%, for example. So if you buy something that costs $10, like a pack of light bulbs, you would pay 6 cents in sales taxes. If you buy something that costs $100, like this pair of sneakers, you pay $6 in sales tax. It's fair that you pay more sales tax for a pair of shoes than a light bulb because you're paying the same tax rate for both. Both are taxed at a rate of 6%, and 6% of $100 is more than 6% of $10. This should be true of property taxes too. For example, the Detroit property tax rate is usually around 2.8%. So this means that if your home is worth $10,000, you should pay $280 in property taxes. And if your home is worth $100,000, you should pay $2,800 in property taxes. This is only fair because everyone is paying the same property tax rate. But when the city of Detroit overvalues low-value homes and undervalues high-value homes, people don't pay the same tax rate anymore, and the city on the whole loses money. Let's look at an example. If the city overvalues a low-valued home at $20,000, the owner would end up paying $560 in property taxes, which is $280 more than they should. If the city undervalues a high-valued house at $50,000, the owner would end up paying $1,400 in property taxes, which is $1,400 less than they should. So in these scenarios, the first home is paying an effective tax rate of 5.6%, and the second home is paying an effective tax rate of 1.4%. Since it is critical that the city of Detroit correctly calculates home values so that taxes can be fairly applied, how do they do it? With the sales tax, you know the value of the thing that you're going to be taxed on up front. For example, a pair of sneakers you're interested in buying have the price listed on them. But with property taxes, authorities must estimate how much your home is worth every year. So how do they do this? A home sales price is a strong indicator of its value. The value of your home is basically what someone would pay to buy it on an open market. So in an example where a house sells for $50,000, it's pretty fair to say that the market value of that house is about $50,000. This, of course, is not the case if you have transactions like a property gets sold at auction or you have a quitclaim deed to a family member. But if it sells on the open market, it's pretty safe to say that it's a good proxy for value. Because properties don't sell often, the assessor needs a way to estimate property values even when a property hasn't recently sold. So they estimate a property's market value using a mathematical formula to factor in things like square footage, number of bedrooms and bathrooms, quality of construction, neighborhood condition, and age of the property to determine what a property's market value is worth. This formula is what's used to estimate a property's market value for the purposes of deriving a tax bill. Once city officials have estimated the market value of a house, they take a couple more steps to determine exactly what an individual owner pays. They calculate the assessed value, which by Michigan law is half of the market value of the house, and the taxable value, which is the portion of your property's assessed value that the City of Detroit is legally allowed to tax you on. This is how they come up with a property tax bill. It's the millage rate, or property tax rate, times the taxable value. If the city's formula estimates the value of a house just right, that's great. That property owner pays their fair share in taxes. Here we see a house with a market value of $50K, and the city's formula has also put the estimated market value at $50K, meaning the homeowner pays $1,400 in taxes, and that's the just and fair amount that the homeowner should be paying. If a property is underassessed, the owner is paying less in taxes than is fair based on the value of the home. Here we see a potential example of this, where the actual market value is $50K, but the estimated value is $25K. This means that the homeowner pays less in taxes, and based on the value of the home, they should be paying more. If a property is overassessed, the opposite happens. The owner pays more in taxes than is fair based on the value of the home. So here's an example of this, same actual market value, but here the estimated market value is higher at $75K. That means that the homeowner pays more in taxes than they should based on what their home is actually worth. It's not surprising that over and under assessments happen because assessments are best guesses based on limited information. However, a growing body of evidence shows that over and under assessments don't happen randomly. In cities across America, the data show that if your house is expensive, you're likely to pay less than your fair share in taxes, and if your house is inexpensive, you're likely to be paying more than your fair share. In an ideal situation, a sales ratio might look like this, a flat line, which would tell you that whether you're in the bottom 10% or the top 10% of sales, you were getting market values that were assessed accurately relative to how the home sells. However, in practice, the data looks like this. Across the nation, lower priced homes are assessed at a higher value relative to their actual sales price. Between 2010 and 2016, the city illegally inflated the property tax assessments of the vast majority of Detroit homes and overtaxed Detroiters by $600 million. After the citywide reappraisal, assessments generally fell, but property tax inequity got worse. Before the reappraisal, the lowest valued homes were assessed at roughly 3 times the rate of the highest valued. After the reappraisal, the lowest valued homes were assessed at 4 times the rate of the highest valued. Between 2018 and 2021, the city assessed the highest valued homes at 17.3% of their value, and the lowest valued homes at 88.2% of their value. This means that the city assessed the lowest valued at over 5 times the rate applied to the highest valued homes. Today, City Council convenes to discuss how to make property tax assessments in Detroit more fair. We'll be hearing from residents, experts, and city staff on the subject.
Imagine losing your entire home and all of its value over just a few dollars in unpaid property taxes. That's exactly what happened to Uri Raffaelli, a retired engineer living in Michigan. In 2011, Raffaelli accidentally underpaid his property taxes by just $8.41. With interest and fees, the total came to about $285. Oakland County seized his rental property, sold it at auction for $24,500, and kept every cent. That means Raffaelli lost not just his property, but also all the value in it, even after his debt was paid. The property owner said that this violates the Michigan State Constitution and the Takings Clause of the U.S. Constitution's Fifth Amendment, which says, "Private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation." If the government takes your house and makes a profit, you deserve the extra money as just compensation. In 2020, the Michigan Supreme Court agreed. They said that keeping surplus money from a tax sale is an unconstitutional taking of private property. In other words, the government can't just pocket your home equity. This case shows that your constitutional rights don't vanish when property taxes go unpaid. If the government sells your house to pay your debt, you deserve the extra money from that sale.
Even Detroit's officials admitted one thing. The Coalition for Property Tax Justice brought this fight into the light.
If you don't push, you'll never go far enough. So I'd like to thank the coalition and others for the push, because to some extent, they're the reason we're here, because they have pushed this discussion to the top of the window.
He's right, but the fight isn't over. The coalition recently launched its first 100 Days plan, which calls on Detroit's mayoral and city council candidates to, in the first 100 days of their term, deliver a people-centered property tax system by 1. Fully implementing the property tax reform ordinance. 2. Making assessments accurate and lawful. 3. Protecting and modernizing the process to obtain the principal residence exemption and HOPE exemption. 4. Providing restitution to overtaxed homeowners. 5. Replace existing chief assessor with one with the proper qualifications. Stand with us. Join the fight for property tax justice. In 2025, our movement for property tax justice secured several wins. We helped 440 Detroit families access wraparound services that help to keep them in their homes. We filed 252 property tax appeals free of charge, fighting illegally inflated tax bills head on. We exposed the truth. Detroit is still overassessing homes under $50,000, pushing working families toward tax foreclosure. And we forced the release of Detroit's long overdue IAAO assessment ratio study, confirming what residents already knew. The system is broken. We brought the community together through coffee and stories, mobilizing over 600 Detroiters in the fight for fair housing. We took the fight national with the launch of Plundered: How Racist Policies Undermine Black Homeownership in America, featuring Professor Bernadette Atuahene and Professor Ibram X. Kendi. And when foreclosures threatened our neighborhoods,
we didn't stay quiet.
We forced a unanimous city council resolution, organized press conferences, and mobilized hundreds of calls and letters to demand a property tax foreclosure moratorium. In 2025, we fought for property tax justice, and we're just getting started. These are just our wins from 2025. We've been at this since 2017, so we have many, many more wins than this. Follow the Coalition for Property Tax Justice on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok to see what else we'll accomplish in 2026.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see everybody here today. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the press conference. All right, so what we are doing here today is my name is Professor Bernadette Atuahene. I'm the executive director of the Institute for Law and Organizing. And as you all know, the Coalition for Property Tax Justice is the first campaign of the Institute for Law and Organizing. I'm so excited to see everybody here. Again, today is the first 100 days of the Sheffield administration. And as many of you know, we put together a very detailed plan on how to fix the structural problems with the property tax system. And we are going to provide a report card on how this Sheffield administration is doing in terms of that plan to make structural change. But before we get going, some of you have been with us for a long time. Some of you are new. So I'm going to let you know that basically what's happening in Detroit is since 2009, 1 in 3 homes have completed the property tax foreclosure process. 1 in 3. We haven't seen this number of property tax foreclosures in American history since the Great Depression. And my research shows that between 2009 and 2015, the city of Detroit assessed up to 83% of its homes in violation of the Michigan State Constitution, which quite clearly says no property can be assessed at more than 50% of its market value. So we've had so many wins that we in this campaign for property tax justice. We have appealed the illegally inflated property taxes of more than 1,000 homeowners through the Property Tax Appeal Project. Go ahead and put a note in the chat if you are one of the people who we have helped doing an appeal for you. We have drafted and passed a city ordinance that made the property tax exemption accessible. Many of you remember there was a whole lawsuit with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, ACLU of Michigan, and Covington and Burling. And one of the results was a settlement with the city of Detroit to make the property tax exemption accessible. That settlement lasted 3 years, but we made an ordinance to make those changes permanent. We did that together. We've also together halted over 13,000 property tax foreclosures of owner-occupied homes. And again, many of you know when people lose a home, they're not just losing bricks and mortar, right? They're losing family memories and pictures and grandmama's quilts and intergenerational wealth. People lose so much through property tax foreclosure. So the fact that we halted the foreclosure of 13,000 homes is a really big accomplishment, again, that we did together. We were able to connect Detroit homeowners with over $4.4 million in federal ARPA money to pay their illegally inflated property tax debt. And we drafted and passed a property tax reform ordinance to provide a structural solution to chronic overassessments in Detroit. And that's one of the things. It was Mary Sheffield, who was our political champion as the city council president. And that's part of what the report card is going to be about, is really evaluating the administration on implementing that very same ordinance that she helped to pass. And last but not least, we have laid the foundation for the Dignity Restoration Project, which is a sister organization that has raised over $750,000, actually now close to $1 million, to compensate foreclosed property tax owners. So you all, you stick with us. I cannot thank you enough. We are winning. Okay, we are accomplishing big things together. And this press conference is, again, with this new administration. We hope to work hand in hand with the new administration to continue fighting for property tax justice. So I want to get us started today on our agenda. The first person up is Miss Betsy Farrington. She's a partner at Goldman, Ishmael, Tomaselli, Brennan, and Baum. She focuses her practice on nationwide products liability litigation and trial. She has extensive experience representing clients in both state and federal courts and is known for her strategic approach and strong advocacy. Betsy is one of the lawyers who filed a case called Howard, which she will tell you all about. And we're starting this press conference off with some very good news, which is that the Howard case has been settled, and the Sheffield administration is responsible for settling that case and moving property tax justice forward. So with no further ado, I'll give the floor to Ms. Betsy Farrington.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. That's right. As Bernadette said, the Howard litigation focused pretty specifically on the notices of property tax assessment in 2017. So in 2017, after a market-wide reappraisal, Detroit sent individual homeowners their property tax assessments on February 14th. The thing about a property tax assessment, the notice of it, is it gives the homeowner their opportunity to appeal that assessment, to say, I have been overassessed. My taxes listed are too high because I have been overassessed. So Detroit sent the notices on February 14th, and by statute, that appeal, the right that homeowners have, was due February 15th. And even the notices themselves said February 18th. So in practice, a homeowner could open up their assessment. They could say, this is too high, I want to appeal it. But the assessment said they were too late, that they couldn't appeal it anymore. The consequences of being overassessed were outlined in the video that started the press conference. But at a minimum, you'd be paying more than you were supposed to. But if you don't have the means to pay your overassessed inflated taxes, you could become delinquent. You have fines and fees associated with that. You could be subject to a tax foreclosure. So in 2020, February of 2020, we filed a lawsuit on behalf of Detroit homeowners alleging that the late notices deprived homeowners of due process. it's an opportunity to appeal your assessment, an opportunity to be heard. We said that in 2017, Detroit deprived homeowners of that right. And we faced a number of hurdles. For one, there is a statute that keeps most of these suits out of federal court because it says a federal court can't basically interfere with a state or local government collecting or levying taxes. And so the city, which was Detroit, but also Wayne County, they moved to dismiss our lawsuit on those grounds, and the district court initially agreed. And so they dismissed our lawsuit in 2021, and we appealed that to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, saying we don't have an adequate remedy under Michigan law because these homeowners didn't have a chance to appeal their assessments. And the Sixth Circuit agreed. They acknowledged that the late notices violated homeowners' due process rights and that there wasn't an adequate remedy. So then it went back down to the district court and we litigated it for years. We underwent discovery and depositions, and we tried to certify a class of different classes of Detroit homeowners. For a number of reasons, our remedies in that lawsuit had to be kind of narrow, but also pretty creative. An individual's assessment for their home is a pretty individual determination, whether someone was overassessed, by how much, whether an appeal in 2017 would have been successful based on the appraisal of the market value, things like that. They're pretty individualized. So the court said that's not really suitable to a class-wide relief in a class action lawsuit. But a primary goal of this litigation from the beginning has been making sure what happened in 2017 wouldn't happen again. That if for any reason notices went out too late, so homeowners' rights to appeal were impacted, that Detroit would need to send individual notice to say, we've waived a deadline or the deadline has moved, to make sure that homeowners know they can still appeal, they can still vindicate their rights and make sure that their assessment is appropriate, that they're paying the amount of taxes they're supposed to, but not more. And that brings us to this year and to the settlement that we reached with the city of Detroit and with Wayne County. So as I mentioned, we filed this lawsuit in 2020. It's been 6 years. And I want to note the contributions very specifically of our 3 remaining plaintiffs, Mr. Jeff Stevenson, Bill Hickey, and Billy Hickey. They, for 6 years, gave a lot of time and energy and helped us to present this case to try to vindicate the rights of Detroit homeowners. And they went through it. They were all deposed. They had a lot of work that they did for this lawsuit. But that then presented itself with this opportunity this year with the new administration to finally settle the claims against the city of Detroit and against Wayne County. There's parts of that settlement that are specific to the plaintiffs, to Mr. Stevenson or Bill and Billy, but what they achieved was the city of Detroit acknowledged publicly and in writing that the tax assessment notices in 2017 violated the due process rights of many Detroit homeowners. They also committed publicly and in writing that they will implement processes to avoid in the future any such situation. So if notices are going to be later than they're supposed to for any reason, individual homeowners, Detroit promised, would receive an individual notice to say this is the new deadline or this deadline is waived. A lot of the kind of creative solutions that we had proposed, that we had hoped a court would implement to say, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. In January, and it was finalized in March, the city agreed that they are going to do this. They are publicly committing to do this. So that's the update. We have settled the claims in the Howard litigation. And I and my firm was really proud to represent Bill and Billy, to represent Jeff, to partner with the coalition, to put these safeguards in place to make sure what happened in 2017 won't happen again.
Betsy, thank you so much, not only for that great presentation, but thank you for your partnership in this fight. Without you and your firm and your team, we would not be here at this win. Again, you all, there was a grave injustice done where people did not get their property tax assessments in time, as Betsy said, right? And we're now in a place where we have a settlement that promises in the future, if this ever happens again, certain processes and procedures to protect people's rights. So again, a huge win for Detroit to make sure property tax injustice never happens again. And we are, working through legislation, we're working through litigation, we're working through grassroots organizing to make sure that, again, property tax justice is a thing, injustice is a thing of the past. All right, with no further ado, I'm gonna go over the report card. Why don't I'll go over it. The team will put the report card in the chat, so you have your own copy of the report card. But let's go through it and let's see how the Sheffield administration has done. As I said, today is day 100 of the new Sheffield administration, and we are going to grade them on their progress towards property tax justice. All right, why is this still a problem? A new University of Chicago report has shown that, again, a report released this year shows that 50% of the homes worth $70,000 and under are still being assessed in violation of the Michigan State Constitution, which quite clearly says no property should be assessed at more than 50% of its market value. All right, so we know that for the lower valued homes in Detroit, these overassessments are still a problem. And we are not just a group out here complaining. We have I took a 9-month course and passed a state exam to become a certified Michigan property tax assessor. Again, we have filed over 1,000 different property tax appeals. So through all of this knowledge, we were able to put before the Sheffield administration a very crystal clear plan for how to get rid of this property tax injustice, because it is still a problem, again, as the latest report has shown. So this is how we did. We tried to be objective in our grading. An A, the administration got an A if they fully implemented the item. A B is for partial implementation. A C if there's no implementation, but they were actively working on it. We only gave them a D if there was no implementation and no active work. And F was just if they refused to implement the policy altogether. So that's the grading scale. So everyone is super clear. All right, the first pillar is we need to place an MMAO qualified individual as Detroit's chief assessing officer. And that has not happened. That the administration gets a D for. Why? Because they haven't even put the job posting out. So as many of you know who've been kind of with us, Alvin Horn is the chief assessor. To be the assessor of a city the size of Detroit, you need to have a particular qualification called the MMAO. Alvin Horn does not have that state required qualification. And so what the city has been doing is they put someone else who has the qualification to just sign the role. Meanwhile, Alvin Horn is this person with the qualifications boss and is running the show. What we're saying is simple. The person running the show needs to have the qualification. Detroit deserves that. Given the level of property tax injustice, this is really simple. You don't have to, the Sheffield administration doesn't have to fire Alvin Horn, but he cannot be running the show when he does not have the proper qualification. And so here the administration gets a D because they haven't even put a job posting out for the position. And Alvin Horn, the current assessor, has certain skill sets, but the quantitative skill sets we need, he does not have. So this is, again, a simple fix. Again, it just seems like common sense, right? Putting a qualified person in charge of the assessment division, but this has not happened. So this is the worst grade that the Sheffield administration has gotten. It's a D. Next is enforcing the property tax reform ordinance passed in 2023. And as many of you know, it was Mary Sheffield as the city council president who was in charge of helping, who was really the one who helped us, the coalition, pass this important piece of legislation. But the Duggan administration failed to implement several pieces of the legislation. And so here we're grading the Sheffield administration on how well they have done since they had come to office in implementing the legislation that she was instrumental in passing. And so the first is we have to ensure the notice of assessment complies with the property tax reform ordinance. And here they get a pretty good grade, a B, a partial implementation. Why? Because they changed the assessment. Now it says the reason for the changes, market value. It's now in a legible font. If you guys got your assessment notices, it used to be in this tiny font. And as you can see, all these are all the reasons, the things that did change in the assessment notice. The reason why it's partial is because there's certain things that did not change, and there's some work to be done. Most clearly is, assessed value, market value, there's all of these terms that people, regular Detroiters don't know, right? And all we said is in the assessment notice, you need to define these terms so that when people are reading their assessment notice, they have everything they need to understand what it's saying, right? Taxable value. These terms you just need to clearly define them, and they failed to do that. And the most important thing too is we wanted them to include a petition form that makes it super easy. If people look at their assessment notice and say, hey, that market value, my house won't sell for that much. We wanted them to include in the notice that they mail to you a petition form that makes it super easy to file the appeal, right? So the form is already there, you fill it out, and then you just mail it back. And they have not done that. Again, putting the petition to the Board of Review in the actual mailing that they send of the property tax assessment notices. Again, so they got a B because they implemented some parts and other parts no. The other thing is the property tax reform ordinance requires the city to produce an annual independent assessment ratio study. So they last year released the assessment ratio study late, and this year they plan to release the study late again. So that's why they got a B minus here. Because why does the timing matter? The whole point is for there to be an independent audit to do an assessment ratio study. And if in fact it shows, like the University of Chicago study showed, that over 50% of the homes worth $70,000 or under, the city is still over assessing, it then gives city council the power to send all of those homes to the March Board of Review for a second review. In other words, the strategy here is to put the burden on the city where it belongs. If we have evidence that a certain group of homes are being systematically overassessed, why should we wait for each and every one of those owners to file an individual appeal? The city needs to be the one correcting it. And so the fact that they keep producing this study late means that city council can't then say, hey, March Board of Review, we need you to take a second look at all of these homes worth 70,000 or under. So the timing matters. And here I believe we were generous. They really should get a C. I'm a professor, I grade hard, but we'll give them a B minus here. All right. Next is provide the property tax assessment data online every February 1st. We really have to take our hats off to the Sheffield administration. They got that data up and ready on time. And a special shout out here to the deputy mayor, Brian, who was working with the coalition really closely to make sure that this data got posted online. Why is that important? Because when we help you all file your appeals, we need that data in order to help you. And so I can't tell you how, again, the deputy mayor went out of his way to make sure that data was posted online and to make sure we had the data we needed to help our neighbors in Detroit. So hats off to the administration on making the data available online. All right, the next pillar is stop over-assessing the lower valued homes. And here, again, this is all on Alvin Horn. One of the reasons why these lower valued homes are still being over-assessed is his over-reliance on warranty deeds. That's a certain kind of deed. Basically, most deeds in Detroit are what called quick claim deeds. And so the fact that he's relying on these rare deeds means that the prices are going to be higher, right? Because And so that's one of the reasons why we're seeing these lower valued homes still being overassessed, because those lower valued homes are using quick claim deeds. But he's using primarily warranty deeds in his economic condition factor analysis. So that's a big D. And again, we need to get rid of Alvin Horn, but this is one of the things he's doing that is causing these lower valued homes to remain overassessed. Next is, again, Alvin Horn, direct the assessor to, what's supposed to happen is every year a house is old, it's supposed to be 1% depreciation, 1%, right? Until 55% good. But what's happening is the assessor's office is not following this state mandated law that says 1% a year. And instead, they're doing a whole different system. And as you all know, Detroit has very old homes. And if you don't depreciate them properly, that's going to cause the lower valued homes to be overassessed. And that's exactly what's happening. Instead of following this rule, what's actually happening is they're doing the exception. There's this other thing that you're supposed to do in just you're allowed to do in a few instances, but that's the way they're moving forward. All right. So the homes are not being depreciated properly. So they get a D for that because they haven't changed that at all. Next is protecting owner-occupant exemptions. What happened here was many of you all had a situation where PRE is a principal resident exemption. So if you were an owner-occupier, you pay less in property taxes. And there was a situation with the assessment office where lots of people got their PRE removed. You all flooded our offices. We helped you to get those PREs back. Then we started studying the situation and found that several LLCs were on the roll, limited liability corporations. And if you're an LLC, you are not supposed to be receiving this owner-occupant exemption. And so we sent through all of the, first of all, the names of the people who were still, the LLCs who were still there. But what's happening now is Alvin Horn said, well, the data that we published is actually wrong, right? So he's saying that we looked through the data and we saw various LLCs still getting this owner-occupant exemption. And so then he says is the data he posted, this is the data that his office posted online on the open data portal. He says, oh, well, that data is wrong. So the point is post the right data so that we have an ability to check. That's transparency to see if you are still giving these LLCs, allowing them to have the PRE. But so we're still waiting on him to post the correct data so that we can then do an analysis to find out what's going on, if this thing is being done correctly or not. And the last of our pillars, again, in our first 100 days plan. And again, the team, go ahead and post the link to the first 100 days plan. So, we did the last press conference about the first 100 days plan, explaining it to you. But go ahead, the team is going to put that link so you can really understand each of our policies. I'm going through them really quickly now for the sake of time, but I want to give you all an opportunity to go through it at your own pace. So the fifth and final pillar of the first 100 days plan was to return the money to overtaxed Detroit homeowners. And this is what we want is credits, tax credits. And here we didn't give the administration a grade because that's really in the hands of state actors. And this is something that's not in the hands of city actors. So we did not give the administration a grade on this. All right. So with that, that's the report card. The team is putting a link to the report card. So you have the slideshow that I just went through with the report card on it. And start putting your questions in the chat. If you all have any questions about the report card, put them in the chat and then we'll answer them at the end of this program. But for now, it's time to take action. Okay. You all know that we are a group about action. We're not a talk shop. We're about getting it done. And so now we want you all to get to work. Every single person on this press on this call, call this number and urge Mayor Mary Sheffield to implement the property tax reform ordinance that she helped to pass. So this is the number you can call. When you call the number, there'll be some instructions, and then it'll connect you with Mary Sheffield's office. So take down this number, and as soon as this press conference is over, get on your phones, call the office, and leave a message for the individuals and let them know you are a concerned Detroit citizen and you want the property tax reform ordinance implemented. You want the first 100 days plan implemented. Your voice matters. The more people who call, the more that the Sheffield administration will understand that this is a priority issue for the people of Detroit. This is not an issue that can be left for at the wayside or until this is an emergency. The fact that over 100,000 people have lost their homes in Detroit due to illegally inflated property taxes is an emergency issue that needs to be addressed immediately. And so with this whole first 100 days, we want to really work with the Sheffield administration so that in the next 100 days, we want to get those D's to A's. And we are excited to work with the Sheffield administration to make sure that the next report card we issue is straight A's, because it's possible. If we work together, it's possible. And we are excited to work with the Sheffield administration to get to where it needs to be, which is a report card with straight A's. We can do it. Okay. It's not impossible. We can do it. If we have the cooperation of the Sheffield administration. All right, you guys all got that number down. The team will also put that number in the chat. So you have it there as well, but it's time to move on. Our next guest who's with us is Professor Christopher Tyson. He's currently the president of the National Community Stabilization Trust and a professor of law at Louisiana State University's Paul M. Herbert Law Center. He has extensive experience in community development and public service. And Mr. Tyson is here. He is a part of a national housing organization. And what we need you all to understand is that Detroit is ground zero for a national problem. So in Detroit, like I said, 1 in 3 homes has been lost, but nationally, the most recent study says Blacks and Hispanics on average pay a 10 to 13% higher property tax rate than whites for the same bundle of goods, which equals about $300 to $400 more per year. And if you live in a community with more than the average number of Blacks or Latinos, that number goes up. So this racialized property tax administration, this overtaxation of Black and brown people is a national issue. And Detroit needs to be understood as ground zero for the problem. But what I like to say, yes, Detroit is ground zero for the problem, but Detroit is also ground zero for the fight back. All right. If you ever need to know about how to fight anti-Black racism, you come to Detroit, because Detroit is a city full of fighters who have been fighting anti-Black racism ever since Black people arrived in Detroit in large numbers through the Great Migration. So if anyone nationally needs to know about how to fight back, come to Detroit. And it is no accident that Detroit is ground zero for the fight back, because this is a city of fighters. Detroiters don't play. And so, again, Mr. Christopher Tyson is going to help us understand the national context for this problem. With no further ado, Professor Christopher Tyson.
Good morning, and thank you, Bernadette, and everyone at the Coalition for putting on this incredibly inspiring press conference and inviting me to offer some comments. As was said, I am president of NCST, the National Community Stabilization Trust. We are a national nonprofit and CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, that focuses on creating pathways to affordable and sustainable homeownership as a way to stabilize neighborhoods and close the racial wealth gap. We were formed in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, where we know because of a host of problems at the national level in finance and policy. Millions of people lost their homes, and we created a glut of foreclosed homes that wrecked the economy. And we were established to ensure that those foreclosed homes came back to the market in ways that met the needs of families aspiring to affordable home ownership. And I'm proud to say that 18 years later, we've done over 28,000 transactions with over 300 community partners around the country, including in Detroit. And we continue to do that work because those distressed and defaulted homes are naturally occurring affordable housing, and they create entryways, pathways for families seeking affordable options to homeownership to access homeownership and remain in homeownership in neighborhoods that are stable, healthy, and prosperous. And so that is our focus. We also focus on federal housing policy and homeownership policy, and we do lending. We support small developers who are rehabilitating vacant housing and getting it back to market. And we do that around the country, including in Detroit. We've been partners with National Faith, Detroit Future City, and others. So we're excited to continue that work around the country and in Detroit in particular. And so that work, the investment that we and so many community partners have made to create pathways to homeownership is what brings me to the work of the coalition today and why it's so very important. We spend a lot of time talking about pathways into homeownership, down payment assistance, credit building, getting families across the threshold. We don't think enough about what happens when they get there, right? Acquiring a home and retaining a home are two sides of the same coin. And we spend more time on the former and not enough on the second. And that gap concerns me. When a family loses a home that they worked hard to get into, not because they couldn't afford it, but because an unjust tax system unfairly extracted wealth that they didn't have to give and they weren't obligated to give, all of that effort upstream means nothing. The home goes vacant. The neighborhood destabilizes. And then it becomes exactly the kind of distressed, vacant property that NCST and our partners are working to stabilize and return to public use. You know, what a sad cycle, right? And so we're in too many cases cleaning up a mess that a broken system helped create. As you've heard today, this is not at all hypothetical. And the work that is happening in Detroit, the data that has been uncovered is instructive, as Bernadette said, not just for Detroit, but for the entire country. The University of Chicago study that found that these inflated assessed values in constitutionally illegal assessments, right, have undermined home ownership for Detroit property owners, particularly Black and Latino families. And we know we have a stubborn racial home ownership gap that a lot of effort has gone to close, but not enough, right? Because it is persistent across generations. And we still have this racial wealth gap. And we know so many of the causes of that, right? The history of redlining, the history of lending discrimination, all of the ways that public investments have been directed away from Black and Latino communities. We know the ways that those property values are structurally undermined. And so for many of us over the last few years, the work that Bernadette and the coalition has done has highlighted yet another factor threatening, a systemic factor threatening the stability of homeownership. And so it's, we were happy to have Bernadette appear in our community briefings seminar to talk about this issue as we work to get our partners around the country aware of all of these threats to the dream of homeownership that we're working so hard to get people to achieve. So this 100-day report card that you're hearing about today puts concrete grades to these failures, and it shows that the new administration has real work ahead of it. And so I'd encourage everyone in this room to look at it not just as an accountability document for Detroit, but as a framework for the kinds of work and the kinds of questions that every city needs to be asking about how its property tax assessment system is treating all of its homeowners, particularly its most vulnerable homeowners. We can't claim to want to see neighborhoods stabilized and all of the positive benefits that redound from that if we aren't looking at all of the structural determinants of devaluation and destabilization in those neighborhoods. And so every one of the foreclosed homes that you've heard about through this work you've heard about today is a family that's displaced. It's a legacy that has vanished. It's a dream that is undermined and stolen. And for many families, all families, their home is typically the most valuable. But we know that Black and Latino property in Black and Latino neighborhoods is undervalued in the market and then overassessed. So make that make sense, right? So we see how all of these structures conspire to rob people of real opportunity and real resources. And then that property enters the distressed inventory that organizations like NCST is working to recover. And it's doing so at a significant cost, not just financially, but a human cost, a cost to neighborhoods, and none of it we can afford. So look, we can deploy all of the CDFI capital in the world. We can train all of the emerging developers who are going to rehabilitate homes house by house, block by block. We can focus on vacant properties. We can create pathways to sustainable and affordable homeownership with down payment assistance and special purpose credit programs, and all of the things, all of the good work that everyone has done. We can do the heirs property work that we need to do to keep families in the home. All of these things NCST is working on. But if the assessment apparatus is working against the very outcomes we're working towards, then we're running up a down escalator. Property tax justice is not some niche issue. It's not even just a Detroit issue. For the families and the communities that NCST works on behalf of and that we care deeply about, this is foundational. So I applaud the coalition on maintaining this accountability structure for the administration, and I implore all of you to take this message to others so that we are truly fueling a national movement and that we can bring justice to more families and make real the promise of affordable and sustainable home ownership. So hats off to the coalition today, and I look forward to the work that lies ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Tyson. Again, you all, we are so blessed to have him in this space, a national housing leader leading a national housing organization. Like I said, our struggle, we are ground zero for the fight back. And all of our experiences are going to help other Black and Brown communities fight against property injustice, because again, this is a national issue. So not only are we today blessed with a national leader, we're also blessed with an international leader, Professor Justin Hansford. He's a member of the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. The General Assembly of the UN elected him to a 3-year term. And he's also professor of law at Howard University School of Law, where he focuses his work on civil rights, human rights, and law and social movements. He's also the founder and executive director of the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center. He has extensive experience in both domestic and international advocacy, advancing racial and economic justice through scholarship, litigation, and global engagement. Again, we hear, again, this is an issue that is getting national attention and also international attention. So with no further ado, I want to give the floor to Professor Justin Hansford.
Thank you so much. And I want to just take a moment to say what an inspiring event this is. I am preparing for our United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent yearly conference next year. And I can assure you that the issues that you are describing, the issues of laws that they say that they're designing for justice, actually delivering injustice, specifically extraction of wealth through the extraction of opportunities for housing, land ownership, all of these different issues are happening all around the country and all around the world to our people. And it is time that we fight back. And I can tell you that as the executive director of the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center, these are the exact issues that Thurgood Marshall fought against so many years ago. And we just have a descendant of those issues now that continue to rear their ugly heads. And what was happening right here, this fight back against property tax injustice in Motown, is something that is going to be a model for us to be able to take and to scale, not just nationally, but internationally. So I want to just give you all a commendation for being able to take this moment and make it something that it will change things, not just locally, not just nationally, but globally. As Bernadette said, I'm a professor at Howard University in Washington, D.C., the best HBCU in the country. And as a professor, I'm used to giving out grades and handing out marks on report cards. And I know that oftentimes people may not like to receive report cards, especially depending on the grades that they may get. And there's some low grades on these report cards that you receive. But the grade is an effort to improve your performance. A grade is not an attack. A grade is a opportunity to learn and grow, and it's something that is extended to you by a partner in your development. So here we have the community being able to serve as a partner in the development of this city to become better and to become what it should be, which is a vehicle for providing justice to the wonderful people of Detroit, Motown, the place that is so close to our hearts, especially in the African American community. And we know that this moment is one where, you know, there's a narrative out there that so many people have lost their homes in Detroit. I think Bernadette just said over 100,000 people have lost their homes because they owe a debt or they owed a debt. But the reality, of course, is that a debt is owed to them. A debt is owed to them. And what we're doing here is beginning the collecting. And as I said before, you're doing it not just for the city of Detroit, you're doing it not just for African Americans in the United States, but Black people throughout the global African diaspora are coming to collect what's theirs, and you are at the cusp of the moment, the movement, and the moment that will change history. So, thank you for all that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing a success in Detroit.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now it's time for questions. Again, audience members, if you could put your questions in the chat. But first, we're going to start with members of the press. If any members of the press have a question, raise your hand, and our virtual producer will unmute you. Any members of the press? I also noticed is that Paris Blessman is here from the Sheffield administration. If you would like some time to speak here, Paris, we'd be more than happy to unmute you to give you a chance to have your voice heard as well. All right. Any questions from the press, members of the press? All right. Well, what I'm going to do is, okay, good. So the question here is, if the person that does have the MMAO certification is just signing off on the role, what's the real impact of having someone in the top role with that certification if they will not do the right thing? Well, hopefully what we're, hoping for is we want someone in that top role with the certification who's going to do the right thing, right? We don't want to put someone in the role just having the certification and not doing the right thing. So again, our position, it's really simple. Detroit has had some serious problems, and at the very least, what Detroit is owed is an assessor who's actually qualified. Again, this is a state qualification, and we are owed an assessor with the correct qualifications. My team, if you could put the questions in the document, Julia, for some reason you're putting them in the chat, but you need to put them in the Google document so I can see the questions from the chat. Oh, and this is not Paris Blessman, it's just a Paris. Okay. So again, our position here is that, again, it's real simple, y'all. Am I being, like, let's get someone in Detroit who has the proper qualification. And it's so crazy to me, the workaround that Detroit is doing to support this unqualified person, right? It's like they then he is legally not allowed to sign the role. Legally, he's not allowed to sign the role because he doesn't have the qualification. So what the administration is doing is hiring some other person to actually sign the role. So the person who's signing the assessment role, who's saying everything is A-okay, who's putting their name behind the role, is not the person who's managing the office. Unbefrickin-leavable. I want y'all to get upset about that, right? It's unbelievable to me. And I always, in my classes, I teach my students the way any injustice moves forward is that it becomes normalized. And this foolishness about having someone else who's other than the assessor sign the role has become normalized. And so what we need to do is bring outrage back to denormalize that foolishness. We need somebody with the correct qualifications signing the role and heading Detroit's assessment office, period. It's really, we have, we've got to start lifting our voices, and we've got to stop accepting, these injustices. All right, next question here. How can I say this? Okay, someone is asking for the University of Chicago study. This year, what they issued is not a full study, it's that statistic. But Rada, if you could put in the chat the graph, the actual graph that the University of Chicago created, either put that in the chat or link to that in the chat, and we will get that to you. Again, I see one of our colleagues from Chicago here, and this is a big problem in Chicago. Black people on the South and West Side are paying a higher effective tax rate than other people in Chicago. So again, we just need to stress to you guys that this is not just a Detroit problem. That's why you've heard from Professor Christopher Tyson and Professor Justin Hansford. All eyes, the nation is watching what's happening here in Detroit, because we are leading the way. Again, we're ground zero for the problem, but we're also ground zero for the fight back. All right. So if I could just bring Betsy Tharrington back up. And, my question, just to make sure, Betsy, if you could let the audience know, when we found the mailing evidence, and we found that the city of Detroit did not mail those assessments in time. If you could just give a little more information about why that was a problem, right? Why, if you could just drill down on why that late mailing was a problem, and then drill down on exactly how the settlement fixes that problem forevermore.
Absolutely. So there's the city of Detroit, and even with the things that have happened since then, this is true in all cities, but it's true in other parts of Wayne County, has a very rigid and time-bound process for appealing your tax assessment. And a lot of what was discussed today is at least implicitly, but really explicitly worked into that, which is to say, if people are overassessed, and we know statistically with empirical evidence that low-income houses are overassessed at a higher rate than high value houses, you need, as a homeowner, you have the right to petition your government to say, hey, this is too high. Or, in the property tax exemption, hey, I'm actually not supposed to be paying this at all. There's supposed to be a way for you to vindicate your rights, not to, at a minimum, pay more than your fair share. At a minimum, not to pay more than you're supposed to. So when we learned that in 2017, the notices didn't come out until February 14th, that's the first time the homeowner would say, oh, this is how much I'm going to owe. This is what they've assessed my house at, and that's the basis for my tax assessment. So they've, let's say, assessed my house at $50,000 and my taxes are $2,800. Actually, my house is not worth that, or actually, I shouldn't be paying that. You're supposed to be able to petition your government to say, hey, this is too high. And in 2017, by sending them out, by issuing them for the first time on February 14th, if anybody is familiar with the process and they've appealed before, they know, hey, the statute says I need to appeal by February 15th. No one could have opened their or received a February 14th mailing by the statutory deadline. And they open up their notice and it says you must appeal by February 18th. Most people didn't receive it by then and certainly didn't have time to do things like contact the coalition. Hey, what are my rights here? Or just know and look into what can I do to avoid overpaying these taxes? And so they believed that the deadline had passed. Now, Detroit said that at a city council meeting, they said, hey, they went out late. We're going to extend the deadline, or we're going to waive this first assessor's review. But people didn't know that. And so for the average homeowner, you receive a notice that says this is what you owe, and you think, no, it's not. But the deadline for me to challenge it has already passed. And so the concern then was, when we have wonderful groups like the coalition, making sure people are aware of their rights, able to appeal their property taxes when they're overassessed, unconstitutionally overassessed, we need to make sure that people have time to do that. And so what Detroit has committed to as part of this settlement, after, again, 6 years of litigating up and down, they said, okay, if it happens again, if for any reason these go out later, we have processes now that make sure that one, it shouldn't go out late, but if it does, every individual homeowner that's affected that didn't receive their notice in time to appeal will have an individualized notice sent to them to say, hey, I know the deadline was February 18th, but actually this year it's going to be March 4th because of the time. That's just an example. But what they have promised to do is to make sure that if they go out late, people still have the opportunity to challenge their assessment, to make sure that they are not putting themselves at risk of overpaying. And again, the consequences of being overassessed are at a minimum paying more than you should. But they are a lot graver for a lot of people. If you don't have, you don't have the funds to pay more than you're supposed to, and then you become delinquent, or you're delinquent for a period of time, and then you are subject to a tax foreclosure. Those are life-changing consequences that we never said, and don't think that this is a fix for everything, but this at least gives people the chance, right? It gives people the time and the opportunity to appeal their assessments when they're overinflated. And we're grateful that the city and that Mayor Sheffield's administration entered into this settlement and promised publicly to enact that so that this doesn't happen again, so that people, through no fault of their own, aren't locked out of the process to have a say in their own assessment.
Thank you, Betsy. We're going to close. We're out of time. If you could put me on a one up with the action, All right, y'all. So we are done. I want to thank you all. The action here, call Mayor Sheffield. Let her know you want the property tax reform ordinance enforced. Let her know you want them to enforce, get that first 100 days plan. And again, our energy is with the Sheffield administration, y'all, is, you know, that we gave you a report card, but we are excited to work with you to get this report card to straight A's, to where it needs to be. It's not where it needs to be now, but we're excited to work with you to get it where it needs to be. We just need the administration to make this a priority and get to work on securing property tax justice for Detroiters, because that's what Detroiters deserve. Again, Detroit is ground zero for the fight back, and I thank each and every one of you who show up time and time again to fight this fight with us. Thank you to our special guests, Betsy Farrington, Justin Hansford, Christopher Tyson, for joining us. It was important to have those national and international voices in this space today, y'all. All right. Bye, everybody. Love you all so much. And I will see you next time. Do this action. Call Mayor Sheffield. Bye, everybody.